Good morning. Excuse me, may I have your attention, please? Good morning, everyone. My name is Fabrice Nipagaritse from Canada. I work for the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. I'm going to be your moderator today for this morning session. It's about enhancing global bioeconomy coordination and monitoring with a focus on food security and nutrition. I guess it's still mid-January. I think it's still okay to wish people Happy New Year. So all the best for you for 2025. And I think for us that are interested in the bioeconomy world, we are really off a good start. Lots of conversation around bioeconomy, and today again, continuing that conversation. We have, I think, an impressive lineup of speakers today to help us think about, think and discuss some of the key challenges and issues around global bioeconomy development. And I think today we're going to try to push the envelope and start talking about how we actually operationalize some of these concepts and ideas. Quickly, in terms of how this session is structured, we first have two speakers to introduce and provide some keynote remarks, and then we have panelists providing some kind of interventions on different aspects of this topic. But we also have opportunity for you, the audience, to ask questions. So without further ado, let's get going. And I'd like to ask perhaps all the panelists and speakers to join me here, and also introduce our first speaker today, Mr. Greg, Dr. Tillman, Ben. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you. So our first speaker is Karina Pimente. She's the National Secretary for Bioeconomy at the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change of Brazil. Over her career, Secretary Pimenta has worked in both private sector and civil society organizations, developing expertise in many areas, including green finance, innovative impact financing instruments, market access strategies, business and small community development, entrepreneurship, development of bioeconomy in areas linked to socio-environment issues in Brazil, especially in the Amazon. Secretary Pimenta, the floor is yours.
So good morning again. So for those who are not here, I was in the first panel, so I feel with some of my colleagues that we continue the conversation, so I excuse myself if I mention again some of the things we discussed in the earlier panel. So thank you very much for the invitation to talk here. I'll make a couple of points because I want to see how the discussion goes and with the audience. Talking about the bioeconomy, I think there are three things that I would like to mention. Yeah? I think the first one is that we are evolving so fast on the idea in the last couple of years, on the idea of how bioeconomy can become this transformational model in the economy, that we want to be very optimistic about it, but also careful in terms of not having this so fluid, so mainstream that it is not something new. It becomes old news. So bioeconomy should be something very transformative of our economies because we are in the need of that as our targets, both in the conventions of biodiversity, of climate, of SDG shows. So it can be a path for transformation. And we have, as policymakers, as advisories, as specialists, we have to build this track. So my first point on that is that we have been talking a lot about bioeconomy, internationally, on the G20, on many forums, on the national policies that are being built or being improved over the years. And it is still not part of international negotiations to talk about bioeconomy, yes. I think G20 created a pathway for that, which Ben will actually talk about. But we also need to expand this, how that is pursued internationally. And one of the points that I want to reinforce is that although we connect a lot with the climate change because that's the climate emergency that we are thinking. And bioeconomy has a very important potential to improve how we achieve our NDCs and our targets in climate. We cannot disconnect bioeconomy of our biodiversity targets and the biodiversity convention. Have to be very straightforward on that because the effects of climate change that we are already feeling, not only in our urban areas, in our countries, in our rural areas, in agriculture, they will remain for a longer period before we reestablish carbon levels and global warming into something. During this period, climate resilience will be very important. Climate resilience in agriculture, in food, and other sectors comes from where? From our capacity to work with the environment. It comes from there. And one of the prejudice that we have is the loss of biodiversity and this ecosystem services around. So I challenge that it will be possible only to work with a carbon perspective on bioeconomy without putting together the ecosystem services that come alongside. And that, of course, differs from the industries, from services, but at some point we have to address this very straightforward. And as we are evolving to talk about like monitoring, we have to look into this very seriously, not only as a byproduct, but as a premise to the work. And I think being able to look into these two dimensions is crucial for us, not only to think about how food and agriculture evolve and how we can use that knowledge and these opportunities, but also how we are using our genetic resources in all this field in terms of creating opportunities for that biotechnology can help us build climate resilience. Yeah. And this is something that goes beyond biomass, but also very important. Brazil has a long-term experience on bioenergy that was using biotechnology, very important biotechnology, to generate biomass that generates our bioenergy, our bioethanol. And that can go effect over time. So I think this is one of the points. And of course, that we talk about this, but how we are going to finance. We are building our carbon markets internationally. There are some countries more advanced. Brazil has just passed legislation on it. It's not even functional yet. But how do you connect the ecosystem services and into the financial system? Yeah, I think that's the question that to think about bioeconomy operation, we'll have to explore that more further on the road. When we look at our experience in Brazil, of course, we have a very important part of our bioeconomy, which is focused on social bioeconomy, and people ask me about that. So social bioeconomy is the only adjective I put to bioeconomy. I don't think we have to put sustainability on that because it should be premise. But social, yes, because every time it connects to indigenous people, to local and traditional communities, it has to be safeguarded in a very important, differentiated way. And ecosystem services, for example, are a very important approach for these people because they already protect the environment, but they are in need of an ecosystem of innovation that will help them entrepreneur, help them create the startups and the business and so forth. And then we have to differentiate the income that comes from producing in the forest, acai, Brazil nut, and all these things, from the service they pay to us into protecting our forests. These are two different incomes that comes along the same process, but the two different important ways. And I say that because the focus should be to talk about finance here, and to talk about finance without drilling down into these fields, it becomes all about big bucks of money. Yeah? It talk about billions and billions that are needed to finance bioeconomy, and of course they are needed, and I'm not saying otherwise. And we will need more and more, but we are lagging behind on climate finance, and we're lagging behind on biodiversity finance. So how? Yes. And this is one point for us to address, but I'll just add some other point to finance, because many times we talk like on a macro level about numbers, but I'm very concerned, very pragmatically concerned about how the money gets to the right people. Yeah? And so we need criteria. And so the importance of the work that Ben will do on G20 is also to help us set out like criteria to monitor bioeconomy, to say, in Brazil, I'm very, how do you say, I'm dedicated actually to work on the Brazilian taxonomy, on sustainable taxonomy that is being built right now, because that's what we want to look, how the taxonomy will distinguish between the different types of sustainability that encompasses in the system, and be able to see what green finance looks like. And for us, the special interest of course is how to distinguish bioeconomy in the different levels of sustainability that are there. So I think these are very important tools to make bioeconomy concrete, not only a fuzzword or a buzzword that will encompasses everything. And the second, and the other part is that these instruments that target finance should be also paid attention to, because many times the great numbers, and just to give an example from home, our credit policy, which is a very important tool for us, for rural credit policy, it's what help us our agriculture become very competitive inside and outside Brazil. But when we look at how it reaches out to bioeconomy, it's not able to. So we have to change the instruments and to work with the banks to do that. So that's something that we have been working to with the different banks in Brazil that implement the policies, to make sure they have the channels to reach out. So otherwise we will be in that conundrum of we have money, but we don't have projects. We have projects, but we don't have money. Yeah, so that we have to move from that to something that is concrete. So, thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Excuse me. Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much. Next, we welcome Gregory Jeff for our keynote speaker. Jack. Slides.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'm here to sort of set the stage of what I think needs to happen to get a vibrant bioeconomy in any country. I'm going to use the US as an example, but I think it really fits for all of the different countries. So I first wanted to mention, what are some of the benefits of a vibrant economy? I'm sure this audience knows them all, but economic opportunities, impacts on climate, making agriculture more sustainable, increasing competition, improving food and nutrition security. But I wanted to sort of link that economics and that food and nutrition security for a second. In the United States, we have about 2 million farms. In the last 5 years, we lost 140,000 farms. In the last 40 years, we've lost 500,000 farms. And that's because farming is hard work, and it's hard to make a living on farm. And so we need to find more income streams for farmers. And so we think that the bioeconomy is one way to do that, to give farmers more income streams to keep farmers farming. And we can't, if farmers are farming, then they can produce the food, but food alone won't pay the bills. So I think that's one of the reasons that I link that improving food and nutrition security with that economic opportunity. So I wanted to mention 4 conditions that I think are really necessary for a vibrant bioeconomy in a country. 1 would be enabling policy environment. 2 would be abundant feedstocks. 3 would be investment in infrastructure. And then 4 would be the markets and consumers. And I want to just briefly talk about each of those. So for the enabling policy environment in the United States, we have an executive order on biotechnology and biomanufacturing that the President issued in September of 2022. And that's the equivalent of our sort of strategy, as you might call it. A lot of countries have national strategies. What's interesting about this is that the whole of government, it looks at health, energy, food, and agriculture, but it also directs agencies to do specific things with specific milestones. So it is the law, you might say, for the federal government. And so it really promotes and really elevates the issue of bioeconomy within the country. And so that's what sets forth that enabling policy. Some of the things that have come out of it so far is a number of different reports. Sort of the first year of the executive order I might call the stock-taking part, where we looked at sort of what exists, and now year 2 and year 3 is about implementation. And so there's a number of different reports that you can get about that. We've set up a National Bioeconomy Board at the White House level and all the departments to sort of begin to implement. You also need, enabling policy at the international level. I put up here the principles from the G20. I know there are others who will talk about that, so I'm not going to talk about that. So I wanted to move on to the second issue, which is abundant feedstocks. What drives the bioeconomy? It's feedstocks. It's biomass. That's sort of the crux of the bioeconomy. If you don't have that, and you can't make any of the products. So, we were required at USDA to look at the biomass supply chain and how do we make it more resilient. The Department of Energy does their billion-ton report, looking at how much biomass is available in the United States. And both those reports, came out and said, hey, the US has a lot of renewable feedstocks. We have a lot out there. The question is, how do we utilize that? How do we take the feedstocks from where they are, get them to where they need to be, transportation? How do we process them? How do we put in place the processing? How do we develop the products from those feedstocks? There's lots of biomass out there. Food loss and waste. We have food waste. We have, all kinds of things. How do we turn those into useful products? How do we take that above ground carbon and substitute it for below ground carbon? And so, that's what comes about in this feedstocks area that I think is very important. The next area is investing in infrastructure. The way I best describe this is, a lot of bio-based products are really going to replace products that are produced from petroleum or other kinds of products in the marketplace. They're not so much new products, but products made in a new way. Well, they're up against an existing infrastructure that's already been paid off. And so how do we build an infrastructure for those new products that can compete economically with the existing products? And so that needs sometimes subsidies, it needs tax incentives, it needs loan guarantees. And I've just put a few of the programs that the federal government has at USDA. We're investing in, forest biotechnology and forest wood products. How do we take hazardous fuel that exists in our forests that otherwise would burn, letting greenhouse gases go out, and utilize that for energy or for other products? How do we take different biomass and bio-waste and turn it into fertilizer, bio-based fertilizer? How do we commit to building out this biomanufacturing infrastructure? And so there are programs here by DOE, by DOD, by USDA to do that. All we can do as the federal government is catalyze. We need partners from industry, from banks and others, otherwise it will never get to the scale that it needs to be. Finally, I wanted to mention talking about building markets, because I think that's, in the end, all of this doesn't work unless consumers buy it, unless there's a market for it. And I wanted to mention 2 things. One, our USDA biocertified label. So this is a label that Congress told USDA to establish now more than 20 years ago. And there are over 10,000 products that have that label. So consumers can see this label, and the label doesn't just say USDA certified bio-based product, but it has the percentage of bio-based content in it. So sometimes there's 100%, sometimes there's 84%. And so consumers who want to buy can buy that. And the companies that I speak to say that it does make a difference in their sales. It's important to them. The second part of this program is there's a mandatory federal procurement for it. So these products get preference in federal procurement. And so we can use the purse of the federal government, which is big in some instances, to help pull the supply chain. Companies that want to develop something can say, well, gee, if I develop it, the federal government's going to buy it. That's a guaranteed market. And so those are kind of ways we can build markets. The other thing I wanted to mention is this measuring the bioeconomy. Well, that's really important. And this was news to me. I'm not a finance guy or anything like that, but I sort of would. So one of these things is the North American Industry Classification System. So one of the ways we measure the economy is by different sectors. So there's a plastic sector, and businesses that are in that plastic sector get measured in that sector. Well, shouldn't there be a bioplastic sector? Right now, all bioplastics just get lumped in with plastics. And so we've been pushing and will continue to push for a North American system that will identify those specifics of the bioeconomy. So a bioplastic sector, a biochemical sector, separating them out. And then as those grow and investors see that, that will lead to investment, lead to more businesses and so forth. So you may think, oh, I'm getting in the weeds here, but in reality, something like that can really help move things along. So those are sort of a policy thing, but a measurement thing. And so, I'll end with that. I hope that I've given some thought to the rest of the panelists, and we can think about going more deeply into what I think are these conditions that all countries need to sort of think about to build that vibrant bioeconomy.
Yes, I think you just gave us certainly certain things to continue to think about, maybe discuss later on. Next, to begin our panel discussion, we have Dr. Tilman Saziek. Excuse me if I didn't pronounce correctly. He's responsible for the implementation of the German National Bioeconomy Strategy at the German Federal Ministry for Food and Agriculture. Dr. Tilman began working on the German National Bioeconomy Strategy in 2016, and he's held multiple positions there as well. And since February 2022, Dr. Tilman is now, as I mentioned, responsible for the implementation of the German National Bioeconomy Strategy within the ministry. So, Dr. Tilman, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Nice. Is anybody passing my slides, or shall I do that?
Do
we have
Yep, I can.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Welcome from my side as well. I'm really happy to be here among all these very nice international, very renowned experts on the bioeconomy with very important roles. I was asked to explain in the huge amount of 6 minutes to you what Germany has been doing in the bioeconomy in the past years and how we were able to align our national priorities to international priorities. Let's see if I can do that. I will start by telling you how the bioeconomy actually evolved in Germany, because we were kind of among the early movers on the bioeconomy internationally. We took up the discussion about the bio-based economy back in 2008, 2009 already, when it was discussed very much in a scientific circle in the European Commission, and then on national level thought we want to follow this concept. It makes a lot of sense to follow the concept to strengthen the share of bio-based resources in our national economy. But since there was nobody doing it worldwide, we didn't really know how to do it, and decided in 2009 to establish the National Bioeconomy Council and give it the task to help us to develop the first national bioeconomy strategy. Christine Lang, for example, she's among us today. She's one of the early German movers too. She was one of the co-heads of that very first bioeconomy council. You see the choice we made by this time was very sustainable. She's still in it. The German Bioeconomy Council by 2010 helped us to establish our first national bioeconomy strategy, which by this time was a research strategy. We were very much talking about research when we were talking about the bioeconomy, because by then we thought, okay, we just need to have these bio-based solutions to substitute fossil-based, and then the transformation will happen by itself. Well, it did not. We had a lot of research, we had a lot of funding, and we noticed we do need an enabling environment on the political level too, to help these solutions to come to the market. This is why only a few years later, in 2013, we added another bioeconomy strategy to our national research strategy in Germany, which was the national policy strategy on bioeconomy. By this time, the decision made the choice to put this strategy with the agricultural ministry, put the agricultural ministry in the lead, because we were convinced that actually that's where the biomass comes from, that's where a sustainable bioeconomy strategy should be led by as well. Well, we started implementing and did very well on that, I think, but of course, among us, the world didn't just stop turning, but we noticed, of course, that preferences and that goals of international policies changed. We had the Sustainable Development Goals, for example, developed, and in 2021, we updated our national bioeconomy strategies and made a fusion out of those two and came up with the current one, which is the national bioeconomy strategy in place in Germany. Well, why am I telling you this? On the one hand, because we have very nice strategy pictures, which I can show, but on the other hand, what I want to make focus on is that the priorities in national bioeconomy policies here in Germany were changing on the challenges we're facing, and of course also on the international situations we have. But from the very beginning on, from the research strategy on already, the international cooperation was a strong pillar in our national implementation, because we strongly believe that implementing a bioeconomy is not a national task that one country can do by its own, because our value chains, they just don't stop on the borders, but they go beyond. And if we want to substitute more fossil by bio-based material, we need to work with strong partners, and therefore we were engaging very early already in international cooperation, both on bilateral cooperation. This is what the German-Brazilian flag stands for. Here we've been working bilaterally with Brazil, with Uruguay, with several other countries on the bioeconomy on a strategical level, very much. But what is at least as important is in multilateral cooperation formats. And especially in the last few years, starting probably with the G20 presidency in Brazil, where Brazil put the topic on the international agenda really prominently, we see that there's a lot happening, and we've been engaging in this very much. And I can see well, Germany is an early mover. I'm an early joiner of the German bioeconomy movement, I would say, and I can say that I'm really glad to see that in the moment we do have this international momentum, we should use it. Yeah, we will talk about what we need in the bioeconomy later on in the discussion, I think, and I will therefore stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tillerman. Now we turn to Christine Lang, the co-chair of the International Advisory Council on Global Bioeconomy. Christine began her career as a scientist and group leader in chemical industry and is now adjunct professor of microbiology and molecular genetics. Currently, she's been in addition to in her current role, she's been co-chair of the German Federal Government Bioeconomy Council from 2012 to 2019, In addition to all that, Christine heads the Bio-Based Future Foundation. Christine, welcome to the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Fabrice, for this nice introduction. Yeah, thanks for having me here. And I would like to share some thoughts on the topic of the global coordination, is the title of this expert panel. And I was thinking I'd just like to give some idea or share some of my ideas with you and also for discussion. So I would say we look at aspects of coordinating and cooperation. There is a few things that need to be seen in the bioeconomy. The bioeconomy is something that is first of all local. So many people start with local initiatives. Farmers are local farmers. But on the other hand, bioeconomy is also global, because we need coordination mechanisms. We're talking about that. We need strategies, as we have national strategies, coordinating trade. So biomass production is something that is local, but is traded somewhere else to be used, and is affecting all and everyone, from environmental challenges to living in a city, urban bioeconomy, rural bioeconomy, food, health, everything is kind of connected with this. And looking at this from this aspect, I would say it's quite expectable that this requires a lot of cooperation networks and of coordination if we want to make it a global economy that is based on bioeconomy. So it will covering a lot of areas. It will be concerning lots of stakeholders and also looking global, regional, national. So it's complex and it's comprehensive. But that's what bioeconomy is. It's not just one sector. So let's look at different sectors. I would first of all turn to society. I know that most of us first think of research or policy, but I would like to point to the fact that society is the main stakeholder. Whatever we do, we have the consumers, we have the health of everybody, and we want to, or we need to include them fully. And I think this is something that's not yet fully understood. I don't mind this because bioeconomy has come a long way, and of course it's coming from research and going into application, and now it's reached global policy. But society is also something that we need to address to. So I give that back to, that would be one of my wishes, that we think of that, including a lot of people, indigenous peoples, youth. This is the generation that comes up. If we are the ones that have started thinking on bioeconomy and connecting everything, youth is the generation that has to take it up and bring it to full success. They would use bioeconomy products, and we have heard from the US example that there are ways to identify bio-based products, to bring them into consumers, and we need education. Education at all levels, actually. It's of course, it's on the one hand, it's schools and it's maybe kindergarten, I don't know, just really early on, but it goes into the later levels also, and we need to educate also senior people just what happens. So this one. The second point I would make is areas of cooperation. In education, as just mentioned, so we need to connect all this. Industry, not to forget, they are the ones to produce. We've heard from US example that that's an important part, to bring up startups into the thing and bring them into bigger companies. Politics, we've talked about it, strategies. This is in government enabling environments, that's what Greg said, and the society. So this is the stakeholders. The third thing is the areas. I know that this is, name of the title of the expert panel is Focus on Agri-Food Systems and Nutrition, and that's true. Food security always has to come first, and we have to think of that, and agri-food systems. But looking at bioeconomy, much more is involved. It's not only food, biomass, agriculture, chemical industry, There's also in the US system a good example that chemical industry is asked to change from fossil raw products to bio-based products and then produce all the different chemicals we need from bio-based. We do need synbio or synthetic biology with that because this is microbes, bacteria mostly, that produce from sugar to higher chemicals. But this is very important. China and Thailand have integrated this already, and US, into their strategies. Construction industry. This is the one that has a whole lot of CO2 emissions and needs to change. So there are now microbial processes to exchange some of the standard traditional ways to do it. You see greening in agriculture, architecture, I would call it. So you see much more on the way of thinking bioeconomy. We have to talk about sustainability by design. So once you start building something, you have to think the circularity and the end of that. You can build concrete with fungal cells and fungal mycelium, for example. Very interesting thing. Not least health and pharma. A big portion of the top 10 pharmaceuticals are biopharmaceuticals produced from biomass with bacterials, with yeast, or with mammalian cells. So you see, this is a whole lot of bioeconomy is more than food and agriculture. And next, fourth, we need a mechanism to interact and coordinate. We need partnerships, and we see already partnerships are evolving. There's partnerships evolving on the agri-food system. There's partnerships evolving on the larger system. The International Bioeconomy Group, like we are doing, Council are doing partnerships. The Latin American Network has partnerships. We have a lot of the people coming together trying to organize into partnerships. This is something you may watch for the next 1 and 2 years. It will grow. And then we come up, hopefully, with a kind of platform or forum to have those partnerships. So, the good news is there is already a forum where we meet for the partnerships, the Global Bioeconomy Summit, last in Nairobi, next year, 26 in Ireland. This is kind of giving us an opportunity to meet and to build bioeconomy further. So we're there. It is going to start, and what I would just like to stop with it, we need to foster all this and remain inclusive and keeping everybody in the bioeconomy, even if it is complex. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Next, we have Kaveh Zaidi, Director at FAO, where he leads work on climate change, biodiversity, and environment, including through partnership with conventions. From 2016 to 2013, Mr. Kaveh serves as Deputy Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific in Bangkok. He has also worked at the United Nations Environment Program in Kenya, Mexico, UK, France, and Thailand. Mr. Kaveh, the floor is yours.
Okay. Yeah. Shall I speak from here?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes. Thank you.
You can hear me, I hope. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. You know, with my apologies to Lev and Marta, and I might not read, you know, the script of what I had, because the conversation has covered so much of the ground. So let me just, if you don't mind, pick up on some of what's been said and highlight what I believe is important before we get into the sort of practicalities of how we ground it. I think it is important to stress and to almost guard the fact that the bioeconomy, as I think both Karina and Greg said, is in a way, it's a way of rethinking our economy. It's not a repackaging exercise, and we have to be wary of that, because even now at this sort of takeoff stage, you see so much sort of this is our biodiversity work, it's bioeconomy. No, it's not. Yeah, this is our sustainable consumption and production work, it's bioeconomy. Not really, right? And I think we have to guard the fact that this is an instrument that can help us with a rethink of the economy as a whole, from the fossil fuel-based economies to bio-based economies. And I think it's important to maintain that integrity of that sort of bioeconomy concept. Given that bioeconomy is not defined per se, there are many bioeconomies, You speak to any country, they'll give you a different interpretation. Ones that are more biotechnology oriented, ones that are more socio-bioeconomy oriented, ones that are more circular bioeconomy oriented, and that's fine. But at the end of it, all of this is to engineer a different approach, and I think that's the first thing that should be stressed. The second thing is that, you know, like with any concept that's, I wouldn't say new, because 10 years, you know, I mean, this 10 years ago, GFFA talked about bioeconomy, so we can't say it's completely new. And even before that, elements of the bioeconomy were present in all countries. But I think that it's probably unlikely that we will create an entirely new bioeconomy stream and a bioeconomy convention and yet another one, right, at the global level. And this is back to Karina's point that we have to make sure that bioeconomy is actually present where it needs to be. Is it present in the conversations around sustainable use of biodiversity, which is now at the heart of the global biodiversity framework? Is it present in the conversations on climate change, you know, in terms of the shift away, in terms of the opportunities for mitigation, in terms of the broader climate action conversation? Why is that important? It's important because then countries will begin to embed the bioeconomy and bioeconomy opportunities into their climate strategies, into their biodiversity strategies, the famous NDCs in climate, the NBSAPs in biodiversity. And if they do, and here's the point, and I made this point over a very nice breakfast at the UK Embassy as well, if they manage to embed the bioeconomy into their approaches towards climate, or use bioeconomy as one of the ways they are taking climate action and biodiversity action, if it's embedded in NDCs and NBSAPs, it can then trigger climate and environment finance. If it isn't, it won't, right? So it's almost a prerequisite to that next step that Karina mentioned. But for that to be, you know, for that to happen, we have to work harder. Already agriculture and food systems and the opportunities of agri-food systems are not as present as they should be, or at the level of ambition that they should have in these plans. Maybe the bioeconomy is a way of engineering that. And I think now is the opportunity. 1 year, that's all we have, right? NDCs, NBSAPs, all of them have to be done this year. So now, or I wouldn't say now or never, but you get my point, not to be overly dramatic. And the third and final point that I wanted to pick up on is that we cannot ignore the economy part of bioeconomy, because this is going to be vital for convincing people to change what they're doing, right? It is, to some extent, and must be about helping to diversify farmer incomes. It is about generating innovations that create new opportunities, new bio-based products, whether it's bioplastics or biofertilizers or biomaterials, whatever it might be. The economy part is important. And so far, although we have bits and pieces of it, I don't think we have made the case, the investment case of really raising the bar and investing in bioeconomy, not just with climate and environment finance, but really as part of the broader conversation, including the conversation about repurposing of agricultural investments at the national level. How much of that repurposing should be conscious of a new bioeconomy approach for the opportunities that brings. So those are just a few of the framing thoughts that I have. And of course, partnership, there's not much more to be said. It's really vital, and we have to continue, and we have to put in place the platforms for sharing and learning quickly from each other, because as you mentioned, bioeconomy goes beyond borders, and that's the partnership that we are trying to put together with the generous support of Germany is really about that. But ultimately, there is going to be a constellation of partnerships, and that's good, right? Some are more regional focused, some are more innovation focused, some are more ag focused, some are otherwise. And we have to find a way of maintaining cohesion of this constellation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Keller. So to round out our panel of speakers' intervention is Ben Durham. He's the Chief Director for Bioinnovation at the National Department of Science, Technology, Innovation in South Africa. His responsibility includes the implementation of South Africa Bioeconomy Strategy, and he's leading the charge on the bioeconomy initiative under South Africa presidency of the G20 in 2025. So, Mr. Ben.
Thanks very much. Good morning all, and thanks very much for the invitation to participate and to the FAO for organizing this particular panel discussion. As indicated, I'm talking to the role of global platforms and initiatives. I want to thank Kevin for giving such a fantastic summary and for the previous speakers to providing their input. I'm focusing particularly on a G20 perspective because South Africa holds the current G20 presidency, and so I'm giving our perspective of what are the key things that they're doing. We are focusing on Africa within the G20 initiative on bioeconomy because we believe it is critical that the whole world moves towards bioeconomies, not just those that have the skills and capabilities and finances to do that. Africa already is a bioeconomy. It's just operating at a fairly low level. So some of the challenges that we want to look at and interrogate in order to come through with suggestions for platforms and initiatives is what is the context of African bioeconomy development. The first point to note is Africa is formed very largely from a colonial legacy where the colonies were created to extract raw materials for export to the colonializing power. And the system has been set up in Africa for that process. And it's a complex system, and systems are never easy to change. Skills and infrastructure have never been the priority in Africa, particularly under colonial regimes. So science and infrastructure for science is somewhat limited in Africa. Research and development, and I need to qualify this statement that I've got, is dependent almost entirely on governments. It's financed from elsewhere, but it is dependent on guidance and support by governments. That's because the private sector is seeking best ideas, best technologies from anywhere else in the world where they are best. So they're not looking to their own institutions for the best technology, they are looking elsewhere. So it's very much a focus on government for support of R&D, and the focus is also on education as opposed to innovation. Funding for research and development, despite what I said in the previous point, comes from elsewhere in the world, philanthropic and foreign direct investment. Science awareness and appreciation of science is also somewhat limited. The environmental dimension of the bioeconomy is relatively strong. The economies in Africa are dependent on the bioeconomy, but they are operating at a relatively low level because, as I said, they are exporting raw materials. They are not providing added value in Africa. The social and economic dimensions, because of this, because we're exporting raw materials without processing them locally, the social and economic dimensions of the bioeconomy are relatively weak. But this is saying that the opportunity in Africa is vast. We already are bioeconomies, and all that we need to do, all in inverted commas, is to valorize them at home. I wish it were that simple, but what I am saying is the opportunity in Africa is vast, and this translates to some extent to the rest of the global south. The point to note that I don't believe we are stressing well enough is climate change is happening, and climate change will affect plant and livestock productivity. It's therefore going to affect the bioeconomy. There's going to be fewer wildlife populations of plants, fauna, and flora. There's going to be changing demographics of where food is produced in the world. There's going to be movements of people from coastal areas inland. I'm not talking necessarily in the next 5 years, but in 50 years' time, within some of our lifetimes, not mine, there is going to be significant change, and the world really needs to wake up to this. So what do we need to do? What is this platform? What is the intervention that needs to happen? And again, speaking from a G20 perspective, firstly, we need to coordinate a global response to this global crisis that we're in. We need to think of things such as targets, mobilizing resources, research and development on impacts of this changing planet. The graph that you can barely see on the right, that you can see on the right-hand side is our extraction of fossil resources from the planet. The dip is COVID. It's not anything yet that apparent because of climate change. So we are still extracting more and more and more fossil fuels. We have not yet started to decrease this. This is my figures according up until 2022. So we haven't set targets for reducing our carbon emissions into the planet. So the leadership and coordination that is required is this global action, this global responsibility for the planet to respond to climate change. We are positioning, we are seeing that the bioeconomy is the ultimate solution. It's not the only the silver bullet, but it is a really important part of the solution that will address the underlying causes of climate change and of biodiversity loss, rather than some of the more symptomatic treatments that are coming out from the climate change and biodiversity conventions. So we're seeing that the bioeconomy is going to address some of the root causes for it, but we are creating an uphill battle for ourselves in the bioeconomy because climate change is going to affect bioeconomy development. So thought leadership, we need to look at global bioeconomy development, governance. It's not enough that all countries do their best in the bioeconomy. We are of the view that the world needs to start acting collectively and in a coordinated fashion to ensure that there is a global bioeconomy that develops. The risks and uncertainties of climate change I've spoken about, they are going to impact bioeconomy development. We need to look at targets for development. We need to incentivize transformation to a bio-based and valorized economy, including things like trade incentives, where the bioeconomy products, which because of their nature of coming at a premium because they're relatively new and need new infrastructure, we need to still incentivize bioeconomy products, particularly over the competitive fossil fuel-based products. And we need to think of things like intellectual property, where technology solutions can be shared around the world to create a better planet without necessarily the financial burden of paying for these technologies. We need to think of that. Intellectual property protection is really good. We need to keep that there, but there may be certain technologies that we would want to ensure are more freely accessible around the world for planetary good. Next point is coordination. It's really good. There is so much happening, for example, in Africa, from philanthropic organizations, from governments, and from various other organizations. But we need to coordinate things better. There needs to be a register, really, of projects that are happening in Africa, for example, so that we don't duplicate or don't learn from the lessons of other projects that are involved. The last slide I've got then is looking more then to the implementation and actions that are required. We need to design catalytic projects. Catalytic projects that can be placed in specific contexts of a bioeconomy. So what will be deployed in Namibia, for example, a very arid country, will be radically different from the Congo, where there are where the rainfall is much higher. So we need to look at the context. We need to consider things such as the policy regime. Greg spoke about 4 enabling requirements for a bioeconomy development. Those hold. I would have added finance to that, particularly from the African perspective. So the examples that we are going to push, but it's not an inclusive list, is indigenous knowledge valorization, bioprocessing, the way of producing bioeconomy goods that's beyond just primary production, and then biorefineries, deriving greater value from biomass or from waste. But there are other examples there. We need a repository of information of who's doing what and what has and has not worked. We need to look at incentives that enable the bioeconomy products over the fossil-based counterparts. Coordinating and stimulating research on climate change impacts. We need to have a better idea of how the world is changing. And I'm not only talking the physical environment, I'm talking about the social dimension as well. As I mentioned, there are going to be changing demographics of food production. How's that going to affect the world? Coordinating and stimulating research on bioeconomy opportunities. There are so many bodies that are doing thinking. We need to coordinate and talk to the common interests for the world. And finally, capacity development in association with catalytic projects and science infrastructure. Having the right skills, the right policy, the right projects, and the right finances are all essential in order to bring about bioeconomy development in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ben. Thanks very much for speakers. I think we have a lot of to cover and discuss. I think as part of my duties as moderator is to manage the time that we have today. So I'll have a question. I don't know if we can put it up there. Question for all the panelists, and then move into the questions from you, the audience. I think Mr. Cave alluded to that. We've been talking about bioeconomy for a while, and it is time to start talking about grounding it. How do we operationalize it worldwide? So the question that I have today, I think I'd like speakers to maybe dig deep a little bit about that. How do we operationalize from concept and the ideas and operationalizing it worldwide? Particularly, the role of, global forum like G20, G7, and the Global Bioeconomy Summit. How do you operation that and move the needle? Ben, maybe I'll start with you, given the G20 South Africa, so maybe you can start with you. But I'll invite speakers to jump in as well. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Fabrice. Can you hear me? Yeah. Excellent. So how do we operationalize? We're all aware that there are so many different levels of awareness and activity on the bioeconomy across the globe. And what we need to realize is that we are now entering a crisis. And if we are to offset this crisis to some extent, although noting that we're already projected to be in overshoot for the 1.5 degrees, and the clawback from something beyond 1.5 degrees is almost vanishingly small. The possibility of clawback from the greater than 1.5 degrees is going to be close to zero because of the compounding effects of all these things. So what I'm desperately hoping for, and this is a negative view of this, is that we mustn't let the absolute crisis make us change, because then we're going to wait another 10 years before we start realizing that we are in crisis. By then, it'll be way too late. It is already too late, but there still is a margin of hope that we need to build on. So it's critically important that we start acting now, and we need the various G bodies and the UN agencies all to start showing leadership on what are the specific requirements. The FAO has shown particular leadership in this area, but things cannot be left to them to solve the world's problems. The whole world needs to start working on. So I'm talking to something like a new world order where we need to all start thinking of how the world must change and how we can take global responsibility for what's happening rather than national responsibility for our bioeconomy.
Thank you. Again, inviting speakers to jump in as well. The question again is, how do we operationalize these concepts that we've been discussing for a while?
I'm happy to jump in. You know, I think the way things happen, if you have success, that breeds interest. And so if we can, you know, set up an enabling environment where we can scale products and get them to market, and we can set up a situation where there's market pull, where there's been consumer education and consumers want to buy these products, or there's industry players who have sustainability goals, and these help meet their sustainability goals, and we have a favorable trading environment so that businesses and others can look and say, I don't just have this market, but I have potentially a global market for my products. I think, you know, you have a few really good success stories, everybody's going to be interested. Everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon. So you know, that's why I think it's important for governments to catalyze enabling policies and situations where they can get some of these new technologies out there. I think the first panel yesterday afternoon talked about how there's so much great research and so many great products, but we have to get them to the marketplace. And I really think we need to get a few of those to the marketplace in a big way that they can make a big worldwide impact. And everybody's going to come running. Everybody's going to want to get on that, going to do that. And I think that will flow. So it's a slightly different take than Ben and others, but I do think that the science is there, the technology is there, the ideas are there. It's getting it through to the end game that needs to happen.
Right. Thank you, Jeff. I think Mr. Cavalier.
I think we've touched upon quite a few of the things that we think would make bioeconomy operational worldwide. Let me just sort of take two to continue the conversation. It is important to get this, I don't know whether you call it the global governance or at least the common understanding of a bioeconomy right. And definitely what happened in the G20, what is happening in the G20 is a part of that, because you begin to identify not necessarily a crystal clear definition, but at least the commonalities of what defines a bioeconomy, because it can't be everything and nothing, right? There has to be, you know, some sort of litmus test that defines what is a bioeconomy, and a sustainable one at that. And I think the partnership that we've been talking about is very much part of that journey. And to use this sort of, you know, that collective understanding to inject the bioeconomy into other conversations, the climate conversation, the biodiversity conversation, and so on. These are all very important to become operational. The second piece, for me, and we've heard quite a lot about it, is to get some sort of metrics around the bioeconomy, about, again, a common understanding of a bioeconomy. Greg, you mentioned that, you know, we don't have right now the industrial kind of measurement. So what we have is basically guesstimates. Plastics, we think 5% is bio-based, so 5%. And then we sort of apply that same thing and come up with a number, and we say, well, we think X% of our GDP is bioeconomy. But I sense if we really want to scale up investment, we've got to go beyond that guesstimate kind of approach to what is and isn't part of the bioeconomy. And I think that's a big part of what we've tried to do in the past at FAO, the aspirational principles and the indicators that are linked to those. And I think that's collective work that we have to push forward and continue, because for me, scaling up finance is contingent on getting some of the metrics sorted out. And there's macro metrics, you know, how the bioeconomy is contributing to these macro desires and aspirations and commitments on climate mitigation, on sustainable use of biodiversity, with a lot of indicators already defined by those processes that we can adopt. But there's the more micro approach also about our own supply chains of specific products within our markets that are bio-based. And I think we need sort of at least to address both of those and get some metrics in place, some common understanding of those metrics in place to be able to go to the next level, especially when it comes to financing and investment.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, definitely the need to, I think others have mentioned, to understand what it is, what is not, and defining metrics, and that will allow not only on the finance aspect of things, but to be able to measure progress as we move forward. In the area of finance, maybe like, I don't know, I think Secretary Pimenta has mentioned in her talk, anything you want to elaborate around that in terms of operationalizing bioeconomy worldwide? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was, to be honest, I was really which angle to approach, because this is a very holistic question. My point, what was in my mind, is that to get it operational, we have to deal do's and not do's with policy coherence. I think one of the we should be talking a little bit about it on bioeconomy is that you know, it's a sum zero at some point. So how we create coherence between the different policies that we have in our countries or internationally, it will you know, say the size of bioeconomy we reach, the successful we'll have, and how that will compete with others. And just to reinforce, and I'm saying that because it is, again, a transformation process. Now, it is not, how you use a very good word, repacking, repacking, yeah, it's not a repacking. So I was even thinking what we should not do at some point, and just to reinforce this, we're not repacking traditional economy into bioeconomy. We shouldn't do that. We don't need, yeah? Just let bioeconomy go away. If you want, bioeconomy has to be pointing out something, and then good things that we need in place to make sure we are on track. It is global governance, it is indicators. We don't have to be so keen to say, bioeconomy is huge. Even us, people ask, you know, journalists always want to say, what is the size of bioeconomy in our country? And I said, I really don't want to answer this question right now, because I don't have the metrics, I don't have the measurements, so any number is a guess. And for me, it is okay if it's not that big. It is okay, because what we are aiming at is transformation, is changing in the system, is not that? If that's what we really want, so what we should be is following on that, and then the work on G20 is good, the work with international mechanisms, the global governance is very important, because we wanted to see change on the future, not just saying, okay, this is big, okay? So that's maybe my point.
Thank you very much. Perhaps before we get the speakers continue, I'll ask maybe the audience to ask questions. I think we have a first question there. Get the mic. Yes. Go. I'd ask that you identify yourself quickly, your affiliation, and also the question to be a little bit quick, and perhaps it's possible to who you're addressing the question to.
I'll try to do my best.
Thank you very much.
Victor Falguera, the manager of the Catalonia Bioeconomy Hub from the Catalan regional government. I'll try to wrap up something that has been floating in the air. Thank you so much for your insights so far. And of course, as Dr. Lang pointed out, bioeconomy is an issue that belongs to every economic sector, because every economic sector feels the pressure for being more sustainable. But taking your words, the things that we need to ask ourselves is bioeconomy in important conversations? And there's one big thing on that. And taking your words again, is bioeconomy in industrial strategy conversations? Because at the end of the day, besides perhaps ecosystem services, we put the focus on raw materials, on feedstocks. And proof for that is that in most states and regions, the bioeconomy strategies are held by the competent authority on food and agriculture, okay? But when we approach the Ministry for Industry or the Department of Industry, we struggle in practice in making actions, because if added value is generated through industrial processes, the tools that we need are industrial policy tools. So I am quite sure that all of you can provide significant insights to that question. In the case of the US, the content of that report that we saw before talk a lot about biomanufacturing or bio-industrial processing, and that's the way, moving towards bioeconomy as a general concept, towards biomanufacturing, and how can we do it? And in the case of Germany, Germany is a country of a very strong and long industrial tradition. So from your perspective, to be more specific, which is your experience on that, on trying to influence the industrial policy in the country? And if you were to give us just one piece of advice about how to do it, what would it be? Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Dr. Tillman, you want to start with the question?
One silver bullet. Easy. No. Before starting to answer the question, I think we would need to step one step back and ask ourselves if really everybody puts industrial, like the industrial part of bioeconomy as the main priority. Probably not. What I think is that that leads me to the question we still have here on the screen as well, what it takes to make the bioeconomy operational. First of all, you really need to think what you want to reach with the bioeconomy. Because the bioeconomy is, the disadvantage of the bioeconomy is its very big advantage. You can use it mainly for everything. You can say, I want to use biomass to save the climate. I want to use biomass to make money. You can do all of that. And depending on the biomass you have, depending on the country size you have, and probably the social structure you have, you will probably define your national goals differently. And in Germany, we're trying, well, what is driving us mainly is sustainability in all three dimensions. So, of course, we are talking to industry. We are in touch with industries. We do have a round table of industrial bioeconomy. And I think the sector is well covered. Nevertheless, it's not like the overarching aim. And I cannot give you a silver bullet how to make the bioeconomy work from the financial point of view. What I just can say is that we need to define what we want to do with the bioeconomy and be aware of what we can actually do. Because what I'm noticing a lot in the international discussions I've been attending to in the past years is that everybody is aware of that the bioeconomy can do a lot of things. But then, on the one hand, what appears a lot now in international texts is concerning national contexts, always. So everybody wants to make sure that he can use the bioeconomy for whatever he needs it to use. And on the other hand, what makes it clear is that everybody who has something in mind, what he wants to do with the bioeconomy, sees the need that everybody else does it too. So what I'm a little afraid of is that we are trying to instrumentalize the bioeconomy to solve a whole economic situation or a whole crisis at the very same time. And we will not, and the bioeconomy just cannot do that. What I observed is, for example, when it comes to bioeconomy value chains, it's not enough that the new bio-based product is better in a certain sense compared to an established product. It needs to be better in all different aspects. And I'm wondering why that is the case. It needs to be better for the climate, better for women, better for social, indigenous. It needs to fulfill all three dimensions of sustainability at the very same time. When it comes to other concepts like the sustainable, like the circular bioeconomy, like the circular economy, this requirement is not there. I mean, I've been attending circular economy conferences where they tell me, well, in the new phone, whatever, you can change now the camera that makes it more repairable. That's a very good example of a sustainable solution. So the circular economy is very good for sustainable. Everybody applauding. That still the whole telephone, the whole cell phone itself is still being produced out of materials you cannot regrow, where children are working, women are probably suffering, and we are overusing our planetary boundaries. Nobody's really caring. So, well, I went a little bit away from what you asked me. Yeah, we need to, of course, we need to include industry, and the bioeconomy needs to be, we need to think about biobasing the industry as well, where it makes sense. We will not be we cannot just highly subsidize industrial applications of the bioeconomy where they don't make sense. And for that, as in any case, we in Germany at least try to talk to the industry and get a feeling of where they are willing to, where they are well prepared to enter the game.
Thank you very much. I think I'll have quickly Karina and Christine respond to the question and ask a question. Yeah, thanks.
Just to bring some very quickly the experience in Brazil, which is very different from what we have been seeing in other countries, because usually as food agriculture, this is the area that leads, and Brazil should be there. We should have done that before, actually. But our national strategy is co-led by three ministries: the environment, industry, and economy. Yeah, and for me, these are three important pillars. And we actually, I said in the previous panel, but our first action was to include bioeconomy, before the strategy was created, to include in the industrialization. And that's why, because it's asking this question that Tilman said, it has to make sense. And what made sense for us there is that we look at how we boost biotechnology, so based on genetic resources and others. So that's why the measurement there is genetic resources using industrial processes. And by industrialization, which we have referenced in agriculture, to cover other segments. Yeah? So this is what, this is from our experience, one of the things. Yeah, now, of course, right now when we are writing of the plan, during this first semester, we are going to see what are the sector priorities, and all this discussion is still going on. So, but just to highlight that that was different from other journeys that we have.
Thank you. Christine.
Yeah, just a quick answer, because I'd like to add to from the German perspective. And yes, industry is interested in new products and bioeconomy. They do research, the innovation. I've worked for 20 years in the chemical industry. And what happens is when you come with new ideas is that the traditional industry fights back. I mean, this is what happens. And you can understand it. You don't need, you have an established production process, you have established manufacturing, and now we come up and ask them to change that for a new production site, for new manufacturing units, for new raw material supply. So everything has to be changed. And of course, this is difficult. If I'm the CEO of such a company, I would ask the researcher, can you guarantee that in 10 years' time, when this process is going on, that it's still profitable, or that it will be profitable? So what we need is a long-term perspective from policies to make this happen. We need probably something that takes away incentives to use the old technologies, but to go into new ones, like tax or subsidies. We can think of a lot of things, but we have to be aware that this is nothing that is easily decided in the industry, but it's completely for economic reasons. And I think we need government policies and frameworks to make this happen.
Thank you. I think we had one more question, and one there. Again, if you can be really quick, that'd be great.
I will be very quick, and I hope the answers will be too. My name is Wiebke Janda from German Environment Agency. I'm working on circular bioeconomy, and what I've heard now on the panel is that, Mr. Schachtzig, you said biomass is limited, and we have to, and also Mrs. Pimenta and Sahedi, we have to prioritize, we have to find the do's and don'ts. So I would be interested in hearing very quickly, maybe from each one of you, what do you see as the single most important conflict of interest in biomass utilization? Where do you see the problem when implementing the bioeconomy? Either on a national scale or globally, or whatever comes to your mind. Thank you.
Who wants to start? Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
I'll get the ball rolling. One of the issues that we recognize in developing African bioeconomies by valorizing primary production goods is the development of markets. Markets are to some extent conservative and protectionist, and what we need to do is overcome that, and in order for the full value chain to be able to be developed. If we're going to develop valorized goods in Africa, we need to be sure that there are viable markets elsewhere in the world that can take these up. Markets can be quite a tricky thing to break into, particularly the standards and metrics that we are talking about that we see as really important for creating a level playing field is going to be different for Africa with fewer institutions and the ability to accredit their bioeconomy products. So market development is a tricky one, and you can see how countries would be interested in maintaining their own markets, which may then well be in conflict with new development opportunities elsewhere in the world. That's one example.
Thanks very much. So have Greg and then Christina.
So I might take a little issue with your question, because I don't really buy into feedstocks are limited. And in fact, I think that these are renewable feedstocks, and there's lots of opportunity for increasing feedstocks. And I'll give just a couple examples. I mean, the US has been doing biofuels for more than 12 years now, and when we established our renewable fuel standard, everybody said, oh, you're gonna produce corn for ethanol. We're not gonna have the same corn for all the food uses and all the other uses that it had, or you're gonna take more land and put it into production. And 12 years later, that's just not the case. Instead, we've increased productivity per acre, and so there has actually no increase in acreage of it, and no reduction in the use of corn for its other purposes. So I think for bioeconomy going forward in the United States, we're looking at intermediate crops or cover crops, double cropping systems where we're using the land. So we're actually making the agriculture more sustainable. We're lowering the carbon intensity scores because we're using that land for multiple purposes. We're using marginal land that don't otherwise get used, and so I think, and we're also switching some of the crops. We're developing some biomass-only crops that produce huge quantities of biomass, whether that's hemp or other types of things. And so I don't really see so much, at least from the U.S. perspective, of the fact that we're going to have to pick and choose where that biomass can go. I see an open funnel in the sense that it's increasing.
Yeah, quickly, Christine. Yeah.
This is a very old discussion we have in Germany, and I have to really follow up with Greg. Biomass, if you look at it, when I started Bioeconomy Council, they told me we have too much corn and it's all going into bioenergy. Then this was stopped and it was started. What today the question in Germany is, or mostly, you forget that waste is a raw material, and that CO2 is a raw material, a carbon that can be used by microbes. And there is degraded land that can be used for growing biomass. And there are models, and you may say no, but there are models and publications also for Germany to explain how that works. The other thing is just stop a bit eating meat, and you have completely different production and efficiency ways. So I do not go with this model that we have not enough biomass. It is to have to look at it a bit innovative and look at it at broader, but I don't think we come into this. And we all of us, I think, say security of food and nutrition is first, and nobody would argue that that is not priority.
Thank you very much. I think we can allow just one more question and a quick response from this. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Bücking. I'm with Fraunhofer in Germany. We do applied research very close to industry. So my question is, first of all, thank you for including all the needed buzzwords for bioeconomy in your statements. Which is very important. On the other hand, what I clearly missed is some kind of fact sheet, some kind of KPI, some kind of milestones, how much we want to invest from government. Do we want to do it on a local side? Do we want to do international projects? Do we want, even in Germany, interact with the different ministries which might be involved? So do we have some kind of pathway, some kind of timetable? Is this needed? Perhaps I'm wrong. No. Thank you.
Thank you. So who would like to take the question? Just one. And yeah, go ahead.
I can get the process going again. No, there is no timetable, and this is what is required. But the expectation per country is going to have to be dependent on that context. We can't expect every country, obviously, to do the same kind of deliverable on that. But there does need to be this leadership that talks about what are the global targets for bioeconomy development, whether it's reduction of fossil fuel dependence and so on. We need to set these global targets and then devolve that back down to a national or regional level and so on. No targets yet. This is the process that Brazil started with the bioeconomy initiative of the G20. It's one of the steps that needs to happen. It needed to happen 10 years ago, but at least we are starting it now.
Thank you. Unfortunately, it's time, but this is what happens when we have an interesting conversation. Time flies very fast. For me, one thing that one key message to take away is, the idea of defining bioeconomy, what it is, what isn't, and when we try to kind of operationalize it worldwide, there has to be some metrics established as we go forward. So, audience, thanks very much for your time today. Please help me thank our panelists for an interesting conversation today. This is not the end of the conversation. I think it will continue, and I invite you to continue to ask these questions. But unfortunately, the time we had for this session has ended. Thank you very much.